So this episode is in partnership with progressdata.io, a research-based tool for HR managers to measure what matters when it comes to gender and diversity, pay gap, and creating parity reports with actionable improvement suggestions. That's progressdata.io. So, hi and welcome to How the Pod. This is the place where we pick the brains of changemakers about tech and society. And today we have Therese Mannheimer, the founder and CEO of Grace Health, who helps millions of women around the world, and especially in emerging markets, to find their wealth to their reproductive health. She has a stunning background within digital and startups since previous years, and is now running this phenomenal startup that is really setting out to help people around the world. So a big warm welcome to you, Therese. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you so much.
How's it going?
It's going well, and it's going in all different directions, but we are in a super intense phase, as you always are in a startup, I guess. But it is hair flopping all over the place and going in warp speed, but it's fun, and we're doing really important work, so I'm happy.
Do you want to tell me a bit more about Grace Health for the people who perhaps don't know about it?
Sure. So Grace is a digital women's health clinic that is built from the ground up for the next billion women online, we usually say. And it's basically focusing on emerging markets and the women who live in low resource settings, which means that she has a different way of handling mobile data. She gets her salary in different ways. She has a different disposable income than maybe you do. And she just has a different setting and culture where it comes to also knowledge level, that we, instead of building something for a Western woman or a user and then adapting to a different market, we're building with these specific settings in mind for the beginning to make sure that it's intuitive, user-centric, and ultimately that we can build a stable and successful business around it.
That is super, super fascinating. How did you've worked in digital, you've had startups previously. Mm-hmm. How did you get into this field? And do you want to tell us a bit about your background as well?
Yes, sure. I studied business and economics in school at university, was too restless to finish. So went off to do a traineeship with an investor an entrepreneur called Johan Stahl von Holstein, who took me and showed me the ropes and basically trained me how to think in solutions instead of problems only. Often people go around whining about things. This isn't working. This is too slow. Why isn't this better? And that's fine, but it doesn't take you anywhere. And so often what the perspective that's missing is how could I change that? How could I make that more efficient? Why does it need to be like this? So that muscle he helped me train. And after that, I worked many years in kind of digital service development for different agencies, whilst initiating a couple of startups that I didn't actually work operationally in, but had the urge to when I found the right thing that motivated me enough and that made me inspired enough to delve into it 100% or 150, I'd say. And then I had the time, and then I worked for a service design agency called Doberman for many, many years, where I had the privilege of meeting like-minded people who also cared about, building fantastic services and products to solve real issues, not only things that could be fun in the meantime. I'm not putting down games or distraction things that can also be valuable, but me personally, I'm more interested in solving real issues that actually has a dramatic effect on your life. But what I saw is that we were spending so much time and energy and innovation power on solving issues for people who already have a lot, who already have a really good rig, who might already have a system that they can go through, whether it be insurances or healthcare or schooling. And so I got to thinking, we should be able to repurpose a lot of what we are doing, the tooling we have, the technology that we have at hand to solve, issues for the many. And so that in conjunction with me getting pregnant, made me think that I, number one, knew nothing about my own body and reproductive health, or very little, which was like shocking to me as a woman in a very privileged position. And then number two, wow, this should be in the hands of every woman. Every woman should know how her body is working and take control, feel normal, because it also is creating, of course, a lot of anxiety. And then the repercussions of all of that. So that was the embryo for the idea, is how can we make a low-fi or lightweight period tracker for women in emerging markets to take control of her reproductive health. That was the idea. So after, some time, I jumped and started doing user research, which a lot about. So I went, and I also saw that I can't sit here in Northern Europe as a white privileged woman thinking that I can solve issues for them, whoever they might be. Instead, I want to know about her, and I want to know, what do we have in common? Because that ultimately is my hypothesis, is that the female body is very similar wherever you go. We have the same organs, we have hormones, but of course then there are variations. Some conditions are more prone in some countries and markets and others not. But ultimately I needed to know, have I just imagined this need, and in what, if it's true, how does it actually work, and how can I build something that's valuable? So I brought a friend. We went to Ghana for 10 days. And when I was thinking about the countries to go to, I met a woman called Estelle Westling, who had been working in Ghana, started companies there for Kinnevik, and knew tons about the market. So she pointed me in the right direction. I went there, did user research, tons of women, doctors, partners, etc. Came home, shared it with her, and she was impressed by how fast you can move from hypothesis to synthesis if you have the right tooling. So she basically jumped ship from where she was and joined me as a partner, and from there on out we founded Grace.
That's phenomenal. And what would you say is the main difference between like the challenges that women have around their reproduction in other countries or in emerging markets rather than in the West?
I'd say the similarities are that it's highly important, and that it carries a lot of value, and there's a lot of cultural attribution to your fertility, to your ability to become a mother, at your leisure, whenever you want to, and with ease, of course. And so for women in Western markets, even though there's there's infertility, there are different types of issues, there's at least an okay ratio doctor to patient. There is somewhere to turn. We have now started talking about infertility as an issue, endometriosis, PCOS, and other conditions that can affect. So there's at least a dialogue happening around fertility, infertility, and clinics that you can go to. Whereas in some of our markets, fertility is so it's so defining of you as a woman, and your ability to conceive, when you've married, is directly correlated to your value as a woman. And since there's little or less knowledge of how actually fertility works with regards to fertile windows, periods, how that can be calculated, and also male infertility and all the other aspects that are in the play, any infertility is often attributed to women, which means that if you're not able to conceive, just because you didn't actually know you had a fertile window, or because maybe your partner is infertile, maybe you just weren't lucky, because it's ultimately quite a little risk or chance every time, even after every intercourse. And also because IVF and of course clinical assistance is not as common. you can be shunned, and it can happen that you're divorced because you're not able to conceive. So it carries not only like the emotional and identical weight, but equally like the societal weight. As well as if you get pregnant too fast, then you're also very poorly off. And so that can affect the rest of your life in terms of schooling and work. So we saw that, a woman's ability to conceive out of choice, not by chance, is such a crucial part for her, both from an identity and control point of view, but also for families, for income, and for societies ultimately. So I'd say we have a lot in common, but also we have a different situation for how to handle it, basically.
And also, I think I've heard that a lot of countries kind of shame women for having, there's a lot of period shame involved.
Yeah, I mean, shame often comes from control. Like if you can shame someone, this is my perception, is that shame is a very strong controlling tool. And so if you make someone feel bad about something that's happening, how you look, how your body's working, then you can make them, subdued, and then you can tell them what to do in a much easier way. So that is one aspect, the conscious control mechanism. And the other one is just because there's a lack of knowledge. There's both the lack of knowledge and there's also the disinformation. So a lot of the information that is being given to women around the world, even in Western markets, is coming from, relatives, mothers, sisters, and it's brought down by people that you trust in your environment. Even I remember when I was in school and got, sex training, whatever it was called, what you had in biology class, basically, it was brought to us, I remember, at some point by the biology teacher, at another point by the gym teacher. And it felt like it was down to whoever was least ashamed of talking about it. And so there wasn't a structure about like, this is how we talk about sexuality, about consent, about rights, about fertility, about the male responsibility, female responsibility. And so there's a lot to be wished for. I think that is one aspect. So let me just go back. And the foundation for Grace is ultimately it's a period tracker as an engine in the bottom. And she then tells us when her period comes, she signs up, she builds a profile. And then we track her period, her fertility, her symptoms and signs, feelings around it, sleep over the time. We then have the value proposition of we have your back. We'll let you know when something is happening. We remind her when is a good time to take a breast exam. We will remind her snippets of, did you know that every day 800 million women across the world have their period, just so you know you're not alone. So everything we're doing is with the intent to normalize, destigmatize, and remove any shame and guilt from the fact that you're a woman with a reproductive system. That is in every aspect. So there's a huge educational base where she can ask her free text questions as well and browse, I got period blood on my finger. Am I dirty? And it's absolutely not. We get these questions. So there's this retention engine in the bottom where we aggregate the data. We get to know her. We build a profile around how she's working. And then we want to ultimately connect the dots with a pattern recognition model that can give her personalized recommendations, that can also be, a tool for early triage when we can say, hey, there's something here in how you're tracking that indicates that you might have a condition or something that you need to seek assistance for. So she also gets the help from us getting to know her. And then the aim ultimately is to connect telemedicine, clinicians, and e-commerce on top of that to build the full-scale women's health clinic.
And as I understand it, you also work with a voice interface.
No, not yet. So the voice interface is something we are looking to integrate even more soon. So it's primarily in writing and rich visuals in the app. So not audio yet.
How big is your market, like country-wise? And then also how many of your users are, for example, smartphone users and versus lo-fi mobile users?
So the market, as we've identified it is women in fertile age in low and middle income countries, which amount to 1.6 billion women. So the total addressable market is huge, you could say. And then we are only operating on smartphones. And so even though we have the vision of course, providing women all the way out to the rural areas with this type of service, it's not in the first stage of the product development. So that is something that's coming later down, when we can also, build on USSD or IVR, which is are two technologies that you'd absolutely need to own to work towards feature phones. But right now, we have initially launched on Facebook Messenger, which to us was a great way to come into the markets quickly, to build on an interface or a platform where women already were and spending a lot of time, and they felt comfortable with the conversational UI. Since then, we've built our own Android app with a max of 5 megs right now to keep it lean. And we have offline centricity, which means that anytime she goes offline or loses connectivity, we also indicate that you're offline currently. What you've sent will be sent whenever you come online again. And so that's a typical problem for many Western apps, that they have no idea what offline centricity is and why it's needed. And so 100% of our users are on smartphones, basically. That's where we are.
And how has it been like building a team?
Super rewarding and super hard. I mean, it's the hardest thing I've ever done.
Do you want to tell me a bit about it?
Yes, it is. For us, being situated where we are in the Nordics, we are, of course, quite a distance away from our users, our primary markets, which can be problematic in many ways, but also can give us a speed and a velocity that we wouldn't be able to do otherwise, and connectivity wise and so on. But I think what we decided very quickly and early was that we wanted to offset some of that risk from being based here with building a multinational team from the beginning. And so we need to have a team with many different nationalities, perspectives, ages, backgrounds, genders represented, to make sure that we can build as valid as we can from the beginning. And with that comes many different ways of working, many different cultures, many different needs, and of course, amazing experiences. So with building a team, I'd say the hardest thing is the density of startups here and the enormous competition on the market of finding talent. There needs to be something happening, because we're competing with such huge companies that have completely different budgets, settings. And so time for us to recruit is, way too long. And so we lose flexibility, we lose agility in speeding up and moving. And that has been something I've spent very much time on. Maybe, in my opinion, I would have liked to spend a little bit less.
And how do you work around it?
We try and think creatively. I think the situation with COVID has, of course, been super tough for everyone on both the team and individual basis. But it's also allowed for us to be much more flexible in how and where we work. And so I doubt we will ever go back to a fully, on the ground setup again, but rather have a hybrid solution where you at times fully work remotely, at times fully work in the office, but in general, split your time. And so hopefully that will open up for us to recruit from all over the world and have multiple time zones represented, which will also make us, up and running. We already are up and running all the time, but rather that there's work in progress 24/7, which to me as a CEO sounds fantastic.
There are definitely benefits and perks of the remote team that's all over the time zones. Yeah. So are you guys making money yet, or have you broken even, or how do you work around commercial viability?
We're neither broken even nor are we having any revenue yet, but we are definitely in monetization tracks right now. So this this whole quarter, the first one and the second one of this year will be, if not solely dedicated, then at least super prioritized for us, because, even though we still have a lot of learnings to do and growth to do, because this is a scale game, we do not want to be one of those companies who kind of leave monetization till later, because it's so inherently crucial for the service that we want to build, and of course for being able to continue to fund our journey. So we're pre-revenue in the sense that we're not making any money that you can count on, but we have some really interesting tests coming up. And our aim is that we have built this as a commercial entity for a reason, is because for us to build longevity and sustainability in these regions, and also to be able to empower her, we can't be an NGO. It would be a very unsustainable way of doing it if you're waiting for someone else to give you cash all the time. We need to build something that is self-sustaining, and also where she as a buyer and as a consumer can feel that she is part of the ecosystem, and that attributes her, validity. So the commercial setup is critical for us. And at the same time, we are changing a whole behavior. And so it takes time. So this is something that is going to be a process over some time, but this year will be absolutely critical for us to prove and to find the mechanisms that we then can scale up.
And what's like the long-term vision?
The long-term vision for Grace is to be the platform, the go-to platform for women in low resource settings, where she can go get both information and education, access to healthcare, and then in the end, products and services delivered to her house. So you could say a one-stop shop for female health for emerging markets.
And how have you been received?
By consumers or by investors?
Yeah, by end consumers.
That's a fun question, because in the beginning, of course, we had one of the insights we're building on is that female health is stigmatized and quite taboo. So that in itself made us think, will she trust us with all of her sensitive questions? Will she be able to be open about what it is that she's wondering? But it has been, quite the opposite. I'd say the need has been so pent up that it's almost like opening a tap. It's like flushing out in terms of questions, and almost without any thought to the forum she's publishing in. And so before, when we were on Facebook, we saw women writing super intimate questions, even on the Facebook ads that we were doing or the posts. So really trying to harness all of this interest is one of our biggest issues, is not to get more water coming out, but it's rather to have a sieve. And that makes it really like, how can we take care of all of this interest and need and package this so we can actually really help her? Because otherwise it's just an influx of questions and need. And it's been amazing though. We've seen so much gratitude. We've seen so much happiness, and just the feeling for her to start feeling like she's in control. I never knew I could even predict my period. I never knew I had a fertile window. Why didn't anyone tell me? Like, oh, I'm allowed to say no. Like, there's so many hygienic fundamental things that you think everyone knew or should know, but it's so rewarding to see the value of the work we're doing for women, and at scale. It's crazy.
How many users do you have today?
So we have two platforms. One now that then is new, which is our new Android app, where we have slightly over 60,000 users. And on Facebook Messenger, we have 770,000.
Wow.
So around 850 in total signed up or downloading.
That's phenomenal. Congratulations.
Thank you. And I guess that's kind of the cool thing with our markets, is that whatever you think, it is, these markets are massive. These markets are massive, and there are so many users, women and men, who need amazingly built products and services. It's such an untapped market. So that is so rewarding that we actually have, quantity. It's great.
And how do you work? Do you work anything with NGOs? Do you like?
We of course look at partnerships more holistically, and so for us there are different types of partnerships. For us, we need different types of partners. We need distribution partners, monetization partners, logistics partners, and NGOs definitely play a part there. And what they do is great, often on the ground work. So often they do, local programs that small teams go out into villages and do educational programs and so on. And then we can be a great leave behind for whenever, they go to places where there are smartphones, or when we're in a position where we can cater to feature phones. But equally, just to build opinion and to drive thought leadership around the question. So yes, of course, we want to collaborate with NGOs, but also commercial entities and FMCG companies, etc.
I want to ask you a little bit more on the topic of success. What do you think success is?
For me personally, or for me as a company builder?
Both.
For me personally, success would be to look back at my life and say that I've worked with things that were hard and challenging, but valuable. It would be to get to spend a lot of time with smart, brilliant people who challenge me. It would be to have a lot of time to spend with my family and with my son and my parents and my boyfriend and friends. And it would be to not avoid hardship. I think I thrive when there's pressure. I like that. I wouldn't want to curate that out of my life, but it's the division of hardship versus, recuperation or rest that I've been bad at. So I think, inserting some more rest into my life or reflection, that is something I would like to do more of. Company-wise, I'd say, obviously success would be when we reach our vision and when we can actually prove that we've touched upon the lives of millions and that we can see scalable, measurable change where we've, shifted opinions around the value of women's bodies, when we've ultimately shifted the power period from other people, men, organizations to her. Yeah.
Those sound amazing.
And also I want to build a really cool place to work. I want this to be a place where you come to work with something that you feel super proud of, with all the time we spend at work. It should be a workplace where you're proud of what you do, but also that you get challenged by super smart people and can do the same as I want to do, which is get heavily challenged and also spend time with your family.
Do you have any people that have influenced you somewhere in life at some point that made you make a change?
Well, I think, like I mentioned, Johan Stahl von Holstein, who very early on, I think when I was, how old was I? I think it was 25, 24. At that stage, many people join maybe McKinsey, Bain, bigger corporations as a trainee, or you get to work your ass off and you do kind of the dog years and you're worth nothing and you work all the time to prove yourself to someone who's done that before and now wants to punish you, basically. To me, Johan gave me huge amounts of responsibility very early, and it can sound very stereotypical, but also told me, like, I assume and completely trust that you can do this. Otherwise, I wouldn't have given it to you. And so just prove it, just like run with it. So I know you can do it, just do it. And so that was, of course, terrifying for someone who had never had that much responsibility or ownership, that someone's like, hey, you need to write a business plan. I've never done that. Just like figure it out. I don't care. Call someone, ask someone, pay someone. I don't mind. He just wanted me to fix it. And that I think really affected my way of thinking in a non-linear way of how things can and cannot be done, as well as my own capability.
And what suggestions or tips would you give to aspiring entrepreneurs?
I'd say don't quit your day job until you've figured out that your idea works. I think take a bet, work on it evenings, weekends, test, and make sure you know and that you've tested it on real users or clients or whoever it is that you want to cater to. Jump when you have something. Don't take in money too fast. Well, ultimately, my biggest advice would be build your business more than most people do, because it is super scary, but it's such a great learning. If you can save off money when you have work, so that you can buy yourself the freedom to test whatever you want to later. Yeah.
Do you have any books that have like especially inspired you?
Yes, quite a few actually. Americana by Chimamanda Ngozi, which is a Nigerian-born writer, amazing, about heritage and culture and how that varies depending on where you're living. Of course, I have so many good books. I have to hang on a second. I need to go look at my bookshelf.
Of course.
Which ones? Yes, I got them.
Yes. Love
you
it.
have to pick. That's horrible. Okay, here we have Americana.
Yeah.
Chimamanda Ngozi. And here is Home Going by Yagyasi, which is also an amazing book about two sisters being split apart at birth and them living completely different lives. Two really strong, amazing books by African-born writers.
Phenomenal. We will link to them below. Yes. Good. So I'm going to ask Catherine if she's got any last questions, because I'm pretty much like, you're like a bullet. Boom. Always. I love it.
I talk a lot, so you have to curate.
It's all good.
It is. It's also a lot. It is truly an epic level of question that you've chosen to take on here. I mean, if you were going to talk about one of the biggest topics that doesn't get talked about, I mean, could you have reached any higher for like female fertility stigmatism in the world? I mean, like, what was it that drove you to reach for something so hugely taboo? Like personally, a bit further away, focusing on emerging markets, going for this commercial, trying to commercialize and destigmatize a huge, long-founded way of thinking. Like, how did we get here?
Yeah. Well, I often say to myself, primarily, like a repetition whenever I feel like I want to give up, is like, if it isn't painful, it's not worth doing. So, or not, if it's not challenging, it's not worth doing, basically. And so I think yes, that's something that I remind myself and the team about regularly, is like, we've chewed off a quite hefty piece of meat. Like, this slice here we've cut up for ourselves is not easily swallowed, and it's not solved in a jiffy either. And so probably couldn't have gone any harder. But when you look at it, I didn't see it any other way. We have to start. But what I don't want to do is, I don't want to start in regulation. I don't want to start in lawmaking. I don't want to go towards politics to solve. I think any change needs to happen with her mindset changing. And so for me, yes, you could see that it's like super, super high level. For me, it's maybe the most operational thing you can do, is if you get into the pocket of someone and you start telling them, if you text Heidi every day and you say to her, like, hey, you're actually doing a really good job. Did you know that you're an amazing person? Did you know that this happens? And then you can actually start seeing her shifting the way she thinks about herself. that to me is so tactical and tangible, that you can change people's way of behaving to yourself, then towards someone else, and then ultimately to your partner. And if we can do that at scale, then you have a change. And then you can have women actually starting to, demand more and say, you're not allowed to say that to me. Or actually, you're wrong. I'm not dirty. Or actually, I actually have the right to go to school. Or, you know what? I don't want to have any more kids. Or I do want to have that work. And then you're starting to see that shift. And I think any person wants to feel like a valid consumer. I earn money so I can pay for what I want to. I don't want to have hand-me-downs or gifts or grants or that's not optimal. Anyone wants to feel like they can sustain themselves. And so if we, instead of saying, oh, you can't afford my Western price doctor's visit, no shit, I don't earn like you do. So then you have to price it according. And then I can say, that actually I can afford. And then that becomes valuable. And then that also says something about her to herself. So for me, it's going super high level to mega micro and then scaling upwards.
It's so interesting you say that you are getting into the pockets of women around the world. And especially when you combine that with your original comment that you are building for the next billion women.
Yep.
On smartphone or, on digital platforms. I think I once heard it said that the fastest way to change a society was to change something about the way you educate the girls. Is that something you also subscribe to?
100%. 100%.
Is it your openly stated goal to change the sexual identity and the sexual attitudes of the next billion women through changing these users?
For sure. And it's not about sexuality in itself. It's about her body, her
fertility.
Normal.
Yeah.
Yes. And it's where sexuality is one bit. But I want all women all over the world to feel normal in herself about what she goes through, how her body is working, her sexuality, her identity, her, how she names herself, whatever that is to you, that's normal. No one else can tell you differently. And so the end goal when we set out is like, I want every woman to feel like that. But to be honest, us three were kind of catered for. I think you and I and Heidi have a fair situation to handle those things. But then there are a big bulk of women who don't. And that's why we're focusing on emerging markets.
Perhaps reproductive would have been a better word than sexuality.
Yeah. No, but reproductive health is such a critical, instrumental part of your identity as a woman, whether you subscribe to that feeling or not, that is defining of your ability to carry a baby or not, potentially. And since that has been upon you, given that is significant to your femininity, it ultimately ends up being that way, whether you think so or not. That's why we want to help you say, homosexuality or identifying as anything else than hetero is illegal, which means thrown in jail in many of our markets. And not only that, you knowing about someone else, thinking along those lines, can throw you in jail for not alarming about that person. So we have, not only, oh, that's horrible, it's illegal, and it can put her and him in a position that is super dangerous. So we need to be a place where they can identify or look up or learn about themselves without risking their life. So it becomes like a really heavy topic as well.
It was so interesting that you said that you were dealing with rather than a lack of trust, you were dealing with like an outpouring of way more intimate information than you expected to do. I was going to ask you, if you were concerned about managing the confidentiality of these, sometimes perhaps legal questions, but it sounds like you already got your hands full of this information.
We already do. We don't have to go into the where the data is aggregated and so on. That becomes just a legal issue. But I think from a ethical perspective, we do not want her to write about her, personal health or challenges on Facebook. So whenever that happens, we say, hey, let's take that question somewhere else. We want to educate her to be healthier towards herself, to make smarter decisions, to, you know, also understand what is private, what is not. Yes, I mean, that was shocking. We also got, you know, we got horrible things as well. You know, I didn't get my period, and we're like, okay, but maybe take a pregnancy test. And then we're like, shit, I'm pregnant. What do I do? And then she asked me, what do I do? And it's like, you know, I could have, you know, and then no, but we get an outpouring of questions, and so many are beautiful, so many are horrific, so many are troublesome, but all of them are important. We get questions that, you know, how can a virgin have sex for her clitoris to open? And it's not even like, it's not even a valid question inherently, you know, it should never open.
Yeah, it implies a basic misunderstanding.
Yes.
Yeah, I suppose those questions give you an indication of just how much work needs to be done.
Yes. And that tells you something about how hard it is.
Yep.
It's a global issue where women's health isn't prioritized enough for women or men to know about, which is why, you know, it doesn't really matter where you live. The information and the understanding about how women's bodies work is you know, extensive wherever we go. Basically, you've also seen and read probably that cars are built for male bodies, crash test dummies are primarily male, medicine are made for male bodies. It's like, no, this is a problem, and that's why we need to start somewhere, and that's educate and make people feel like women's bodies actually matter in the debate.
I was at least partially encouraged in the last few weeks to see there was a growing debate around the COVID vaccines, where people are openly talking about the fact that pregnant women are never represented in clinical trials for some good reasons.
You can't
understandable.
Test on them. Yeah.
Sure. But this means that like a huge swathe of the population will not be able to get vaccinated. But at least, you know, we're now having more of this discussion, and it's a global discussion because there are pregnant women in every bloody country.
Of course. There are pregnant people everywhere. And I think also, you know, as a tech startup person, Heidi, you know, the term measure what matters is, well, we don't measure women, and therefore we don't matter. And so we need to start measuring at some point and starting to see, you know, what is actually happening? How can we quantify it? How can we understand it? Because then we can put numbers on it. And if we have numbers on it, then it becomes important.
I couldn't agree more. And I think on that note, that is a brilliant ending quote, Therese.
Thank you.
Phenomenal. We're going to let you go. I bet you have a gazillion more important things to do than sit here and chat with us.
Like shower.
Like shower. Happy shower.
Thank you.
All right. A big hug. Take care.
You too. Best of luck both. Bye.
Hey.
Remember to sign up to our newsletter at howthepod.com. And follow us on Spotify, Acast, and iTunes for more perspectives on change in tech and society.